Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Hail to Michigan podcast. I am your host, Ronnie Harder, and today I am joined by my two gracious co-hosts, Contown and Matt. Let's switch gears and talk about the stars of the show last year, and that was the running back room. With Hassan Haskins leaving, you've got Blake Corum that's going to be running back one, Donovan Edwards running back two. It's going to be set. We were talking off air, Contown, before the pod started. We were talking about how the running back seemed a little bit on the lighter side, as well as the offensive line. So, kind of talk about your thoughts on that and what we could see, differently from the running game this year as opposed to last year.
Yeah, so it's last year you had a really nice balance of skill sets, a diversity of skill sets in that room. And Blake Corman and Donovan Edwards are certainly not identical players, but there's more overlap in their skill sets than there is with Hassan Haskins. They're both competent pass catchers. They're both more on the slighter side. Blake is listed at 210, and he's definitely put on some weight since his freshman year. But he's still only 5'8". Donovan, for his listed height, he's at least 6 feet tall. He's only listed at 204. So neither are a guy that a 225, 230 pound linebacker is gonna be super afraid of in the hole. Whereas Hassan Haskins, you didn't know if he was gonna run through your teeth or jump over you. So it's going to be interesting. They're two incredibly skilled players. Edwards and Corum. Should be probably two of the three or four most prolific stat accumulators on the offense this year.
Yeah.
But who's going to be the short yardage guy? Who's going to be the guy when the defense knows where the ball is going on 3rd and 2 or
Yeah.
on 4th and 1? Who's going to be the guy that can put his head down and run through someone's face mask? I
Just
don't
put
know. It
Rayshon
could
Benny
be
back there. Fuck it.
or
Just do
or
it.
Kenneth Grant.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. No, that. Yeah. Just
so I know they they
be over
they
with.
they played they played Clem Mullings there in the
Mm-hmm.
spring, and supposedly some offers out of high school for him were at running back.
Running back. Yep.
And then there's always Tavi Dunlap, who's going into his second year. He is a bigger back naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And he's gained some weight
Prolific
too,
high school
according to
guy.
the roster.
Yeah, yeah. So it'll be interesting. Maybe a third back doesn't really emerge, and Blake or Donovan kind of picks up that mantle that Haskins had last year,
Yeah.
or maybe they need someone to fill in that role. I'm not really sure. That'll be something interesting to see this year.
Real quick before we jump over to Matt, do you anticipate Blake to, I guess, be a bigger feature in terms of the passing game? Because last year it seemed like a lot of times when you passed him the ball, he kind of got the yips, so to speak, especially in the Michigan State game. That was a
He had some key drops last year.
yeah. Georgia too.
Even in Georgia. I think I want to say he had one against Washington.
Yeah, Michigan State was most notable too
Um,
because he had
yeah,
two big drops. One of them I thought was going to be a touchdown if he
the
caught it.
one was a touchdown. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, and that was I think to go up 14-0,
14
which would
nothing.
have been
Yep,
big at that bet. Yeah,
would have
so
been game over.
um, I think he's capable. I don't think he's probably not ever going to be Donovan. I mean,
Yeah,
Donovan could
Donovan
be
could
a
be a slot
full-time wide
receiver.
receiver,
Yeah,
right? So I mean, I think he's capable. I think he's someone that at least has enough skill as a receiver to have that threat when he's in the game. But I don't know that you're going to see a ton of doing what they do with Donovan, where they'll motion him out of the backfield or even line him up out wide to begin with. They did it a little bit last year, couple times with some success, and he. Most of the time he does catch the ball well out of the backfield. He's a great check down option for Cade.
absolutely.
But yeah, that's something to watch as well. He did have some big drops last year, and that's a reported skill of his, a scouted skill of his out of high school was a plus receiver out of the backfield. So
Yeah,
um, yeah,
Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that despite both of them being kind of the top two being kind of scat back, most would refer to them as all around or scat backs. They're very different players. I almost wonder if Donovan may end up getting more of the lion's share by the end of the year. Just because I just think he's just more versatile, can kind of do it all. I think the point about Corum's receiving ability, um, being a question, certainly an issue. I almost wonder, with the line being a little smaller, I almost wonder if they'll, um, I noticed not all of them are smaller, by any means, but I noticed a few of the weights seem down. From what we had expected. I don't know if that was on purpose, if that's just an oversight. I never know with the official roster.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if it's possible if they're going to do a little bit more outside zone.
Yes. Yes.
Stuff like that.
Out.
Yeah. I mean, it suits running backs a little bit.
We may or may not have said this before you jumped on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not surprising. Because, I mean, it's noticeable with Keegan and Zenner. I mean,
Hayes,
those guys. Well, but Hayes was lighter. Like, that doesn't completely surprise me. Like,
yeah,
Keegan was massive.
Yeah, Keegan was massive.
Keegan's listed like 20 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he's really 305, like, we are certainly changing something schematically.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot more.
It's not even just the pulling. Like, they did a lot of that last year, but more of an outside zone focus. I mean, Corum was pretty good on the counter stuff, which is an inside run, but Haskins was a lot of split zone, inside tight zone, especially in the short yardage. I mean, if we don't feel like we have that, maybe that's the reason. Maybe that's completely overreacting to a roster, but I don't think it's nothing.
I want to say the whatever 40, 50-yard run Corum had against Ohio State in the second half last year was an outside zone. I could be misremembering, but
he's kind of handoff. He went to the outside, then he cut back inside. He just ran straight through the middle because he was running left, and then he just cut back right and just went straight through the middle of the line. But it's not just.
I think it's a. I know. It's a scheme that could suit Corum well.
I think so too.
So yeah, I mean, if it's intentional, that's something.
Because that's very similar. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's very similar to what the Ravens run, right? And that's why Weiss is here to kind of install, the similar running scheme or just schematics in general as the Ravens are.
The Ravens do a little bit of everything with Lamar just because.
Yeah, just because you can with him, but in terms of just handing it off to their running back, is it a lot of outside zone or is it stretch, inside zone? Like what's the bulk of what they run?
Their base counter team. If you had to call them anything, I would, off the top of my head, I think of the Ravens as a heavy counter team, but I would assume they mix in a lot of outside zone as well.
Got it. Yeah, when it comes to schematics and things like that, I'm not too knowledgeable as much as you guys are. So,
well, I know they run a ton of. They'll run bash and they'll run.
I was just gonna say they run a lot of QB read, like with jet action, inverted veer.
Got it.
Power read is what a lot of people call that. Inverted veer is what's on the video game.
Any last thoughts on the running back room? I mean, it's kind of cut and dry with that position group this year.
Yeah, one thing I want to I thought Mullins was impressive, but I think just for the sake of the depth at linebacker, I think if we see Mullins, that's probably not a great sign for Dunlap.
Yeah, I would agree. Didn't Dunlap have some fumbling issues or something?
I think that was mentioned. But so did Donovan. So
Donovan too. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not certain that that Mullins won't get some snaps, but I think if we do see that, that's either because we had an injury or, and with them talking a little bit about Henning, remember in the spring we saw Henning like kind of in the backfield a little bit too.
Yeah, that quote unquote Deebo Samuel role.
Yeah, like all of that stuff just leads me to believe that
I don't think they trust Dunlap yet.
Well,
or just that third running back, so to speak.
It just leads me to believe that schematically it's just going to be a little bit different. Whether it's dramatic or not, we'll see. But
I agree. And yeah, the schedule's easy enough to where you can kind of experiment with that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I just watched the Corum round against Ohio State. I think it's out. I think it's inside. They ran a bash right before that.
Yeah.
I think it's inside, but just the center gets such a good reach that it seems like they're like out sprinting.
Yeah.
That is an unbelievable block by the
Vastardis. I just found it too. It almost like it's such a good block by Vastardis that it almost looks like Ohio State was slanting away. They weren't, but like you get the defensive end away from the run is like not hugging Stuber. He's way out in space. I don't know if that's Harrison or who. No, it's Smith. Harrison is way upfield on Hayes, and Keegan has a free release like 5 yards downfield. But this is not an Ohio State podcast, despite how much we could talk about how terrible their front seven was last year.
Yep, I completely agree. So let's shift over to the offensive line. We were just talking about them in this last segment about the running backs, and you just mentioned Vastardis, and he's gone now, but he's being replaced by Oluwatimi, transfer from Virginia, who's honestly he's better. What's the center award? Is it the Remington Trophy? Is that the?
Yes.
Did he win it last year? Or was he a finalist?
He was a finalist.
He was a finalist. That's right, Linderbaum. Yeah.
Supposedly he finished second. I don't know if that you can even check that. Supposedly Olu was number 2 of the 3 finalists.
Ah, got it. We'll go with number 2. He's number 2 in our hearts. And then at right tackle, Andrew Stuber's gone. Went on to the draft, and he's being replaced by what everybody assumes to be Trente Jones. I know him and Carson Barnhart have been battling it out, but from all reports, it just seems like Jones is the clear front runner there to start. Matt, we're going to start with you. What are you expecting out of this offensive line? It's an offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award last year. They lost 2 guys, one to the NFL, one just graduated. They're being replaced by 2 guys that you could argue could possibly end up being better than the ones that they're replacing from last year.
Yeah, I'm expecting them to be even better. We've talked a little bit, kind of off air, that we thought the O-line was awesome last year, but, maybe not truly the best O-line in the country. Yeah. And, at times they certainly were dominant, throughout the year. But I expect them to be even better this year. I mean, replacing 2 starters, I was a big Stuber fan, but Jones was already the 6th O-lineman last year. I'd venture to, make a bet that there's not many 6th O-linemen better than Carson Barnhart in the country. You replace the center with an upgrade as much as we love Vastardis. I'm expecting them to be dominant from start to finish. It's the strength of the team. It's really what the program has and should be built on. There really isn't a big weakness, and it could be extremely dominant if if Ryan Hayes takes a big step. I think he's been good, and I think the ceiling is still there for him.
Yeah, it's really high.
And I think if he would kind of take that jump to reach it, there's not going to be many lines that are even in the same ballpark as this group.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly the best in the Big Ten, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's Keegan had some rough patches last year. Zinner started off kind of slow with some injuries, but I expect the starters to be really good. Um, I expect there to be some decent depth, maybe um, 8 guys that they feel good about, and then maybe 9, depending on how far along Jeff Percy comes. So um, I'm expecting big things. I just think they're going to be really good.
So what are we expecting to be that? I guess you could say that second string. Like obviously it's gonna be Barnhart. We're gonna have Percy at left tackle and Crippen at center,
Yep, and then Gio Al-Hadi at right guard,
right guard.
and then I would have said Reese Atterbury at left guard,
Atterbury.
I
but
think
he had
Raheem.
it'll probably be Raheem.
Reese had an injury, no?
Yes, because of Reese's injury. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
which is a shame because honestly, Michigan's in a really good position interior wise on the offensive line because Raheem easily could be a starter in a year. Crippen could probably end up being a starter right now, and Reese Atterbury could very well be a starter right now too. He's in his third year in the program. Seems like he's progressed really well, but Michigan's just been so stacked on the interior or just along the whole offensive line. So
yeah, it's really getting back to the point where they should have good players that aren't starting until their redshirt sophomore or redshirt junior year.
yeah, just like how Michigan was back in the day under like Lloyd Carr.
Right. I mean, Jeff Percy, I still have high expectations for him.
Agreed.
And he won't start this year. Like
No.
he'll next year will be, I believe, his redshirt junior year. And like I'll be talking on this podcast at this time next year, expecting big things from Jeff Percy. Like they're just going to
next year. It's not even a guarantee he'll start next year, because you're going to have competition now from Gentry,
Barnhart,
or Jones won't go early, and Coach Moore has said that left tackle might be Barnhart's best position.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, you got a guy as good as we think Percy can be, and he's not even, by the time he's a redshirt sophomore or whatever he's going to be next year, he's not even going to be a guarantee to slot into one of the tackle jobs. So
I mean, that's where we're at with Barnhart right now. Barnhart's a 4-year guy.
Absolutely, he could be a starter easily. He'd probably be a starter at almost any other Big Ten program.
I think he's. So the one thing I'd say about the depth is, I mean, you can slot out what would be a really competent second line, but I would say Carson Barnhart's probably your backup at 3 or 4 of the 5 spots.
Every spot.
Like if someone goes down in the game, that would be my guess.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Yeah. Crippen's your first guy off the bench if Olu were to go down for some reason. Knock on wood.
Yeah, I'd agree, especially with Atterbury's injury. Especially if it was a long-term thing, they'd put Barnhart in at guard over over Raheem or over Gio at this point, I think.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, I don't want to foreshadow too much, but it got me thinking, like, Olu's going to be gone next year. Hayes will likely be gone next year. Do we expect Zinter or Keegan to leave as well?
I would say I would guess Zinter would leave. His testing is going to be crazy.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, honestly, then you would probably just do Crippen at center, Barnhart at right guard, and Percy at left tackle. But then at the same time, like, what if Barnhart's better at left tackle than Percy? Then what do you do then? I don't know. A lot of possibilities on that offensive line.
Yeah, I could see both
scenarios.
Honestly, I could see both guards going.
Yeah.
Just they've been here for a little while. Is Zinter a class below Keegan?
Yes.
Yes, he was a 2020.
Yeah.
Zinter would be like a leave after 3 years, and Keegan would be deciding whether or not to come back for a 5th.
Yeah, Zinter's a true junior, I think. No.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Keegan's a redshirt junior or something.
I could see Keegan with 2 years of film as a starter if he has a step up year this year going as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of having put his time in, accomplished a lot at Michigan. So could be replacing a lot next year, but the depth is starting to get there where you don't worry about that as much.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the big concern would be is if, obviously Hayes and Olu graduate, and if two of the three other guys went early, then all of a sudden guys you were expecting to be kind of depth, are starters.
yeah.
So
Right.
so then you're getting a little thin on the back end, but that's the next year problem.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Um,
and Tristan Bounds was listed at 311 on the updated schedule that we got. So yeah, he's coming along in the weight department. I mean, he's 6'8", so he might need a little more weight than others, but he
yeah.
was kind of like a basketball kid that they were building into a tackle. So
He did not
he's
look 311 at the spring game.
no, he didn't. He still looks really, really gangly. But he's got some time.
So overall thoughts, Contown, on just the O line this year compared to last year?
I think it's a higher ceiling. I think it could be the best. It could be actually the best offensive line in the country. We mentioned that or Matt mentioned that we didn't necessarily think Michigan was the best offensive line in the country. And it was upper tier, but it was helped by the running game and kind of the style of play maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think the addition of Olu can be. I don't think it can be overstated. I mean, it's a huge, huge position on the offense to add an All-American caliber player, a guy who's spoken highly of as a leader, an academic All-American, to basically get another Andrew Vastardis who probably has a higher upside than Andrew Vastardis. I mean, Olu will get a shot in the NFL, and shout out my Greek brother Vastardis, but he's not going to play in the NFL. Like to basically get another year of a better version of Vastardis is
Yeah.
A huge, huge piece for this offensive line. So really, you feel like you're only really replacing Stuber at right tackle.
Yes. I
And
agree.
and we've heard, Stuber himself talked about how athletic Trenty Jones is.
His high school film is
Um,
ridiculous.
comes from a great high school program
Yes.
in Georgia.
Georgia. Yeah.
And Stuber, spoke very highly of him. The coaches think a lot of him, so you feel good about it. It should be the strength of the team
His
again.
ceiling is certainly higher, and I don't want to discredit what's his name? Stuber. Forgot Stuber's name for a second. I don't want to discredit what Stuber did last year because it was magnificent. But man, I'm excited to see what Trente Jones could do because I think he fits the scheme a lot better than Stuber did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he should be able to get out and move. Yeah, I mean, we just got to see him do it. But you're hearing the right things about Jones.
Yeah.
Um, I'm excited. Should be another great offensive line. The only issue I really have, it's not an issue, but future concern is, let's say you do turnover Hayes this year as we expect. I think maybe next year you start to worry about tackle depth just based
Absolutely.
on
Yep.
recruiting. So let's say if Barnhart or Percy slides in, now your depth is Bounds
Finn. Yeah.
and Gentry and then we don't know. But
I have no clue.
living in the moment, that's a next year problem, and
Yeah.
everything feels great this year.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Outlook of offensive tackle seems to be a bit thin because I don't think they got one in the 22 class, a true offensive tackle, that is. Had a couple guys listed as an offensive tackle, but I think we've all said offline that that they translate more to the inside than they do on the
Yeah.
outside. So
And leadership, I love the leadership. I mean, it's an old group. Even Trenton
Yeah.
Jones stepping in as a new starter is an older new starter, and he's an upperclassman. He's been here for a little while now, so ton of leadership. It's an offensive line that has beat Ohio State, has beat Iowa, has beat Wisconsin. Like, this is a battered, decorated offensive line that
The
Michigan
intangibles are
gets
there.
to go into battle. Yeah. So
Yeah, Zinter is the youngest guy age-wise, and he's a
crazy.
3-year
And
starter.
he's old. Not old, but
that's wild. So Zinter's a class younger than Trenty Jones.
Correct.
wow.
Trent and
That's
Barnhart
wild.
are in the same class.
That's a veteran group that has amazing chemistry, great coaching. I mean, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to succeed.
Yeah, Hayes is a 5th year, Olu's a 6th year, Jones and Keegan are 4th years,
Wow.
and
6 years
Zinter's
from
a
Olu.
3rd year.
I didn't realize he was a 6-year.
He started his career at the Air Force.
Yep.
Before going to Virginia. I mean, Olu is I don't think he's technically a veteran, but salute the troops. Olu's like a decorated soldier.
The
out
salute
here.
emoji. Salute to him. Any last thoughts on the O-line before we move on to probably my favorite position groups out of all the position groups?
Yeah, I just looked at Olu started in 17. He was in Donovan Peoples-Jones' class.
Holy shit. Peoples-Jones got
Yeah,
into a
this is a
fight
lot.
yesterday at camp.
We don't need to talk about him.
Broke his nail.
Matt's Cleveland Browns.
No, that's why I don't
God.
want to talk about it. I love DPJ, but I don't want to talk about the Browns at all.
Yeah, they're in the news for all the wrong reasons right now, but this is a Michigan podcast. We'll talk about that off air. That does it for this episode of the Hail to Michigan podcast. In the meantime, check out this episode on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. And Matt, Contown, you guys have a great rest of the week. Everybody else have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time. Go Blue.